Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to do another top 10 list. Now, I'm going to talk about 10 canceled Sonic media. I'm calling it media because I am going to talk about one movie. So, there's Sonic games that were going to be made but didn't for a variety of reasons. So, yeah, let's get into this. Sonic Sports was a game that was in development for the Sega Genesis accessory, the Sega 32X. It was a sports game which was said to be similar to the Genesis game Acme All-Stars. This game would have featured both Sonic characters, as well as other Sega characters as well. The only confirmed characters for this game were Sonic, Tails, as well as Rystar. But there was probably going to be many more Sonic and Sega characters if this game did get made. The sports that were seemingly going to be featured were basketball, volleyball, and soccer. It's unknown why it got canceled, but I would guess it was canceled due to the commercial failure of the Sega 32X. Sonic the Hedgehog Awakening is believed to be a sequel to Sonic 2006. I say believe because it is actually widely theorized that this game doesn't even exist. The only proof that this game could have existed is that it was listed on the then voice actor for Silver, Pete Capella's website, alongside released Sonic games. That's all that's known about this supposed game. The most common theory is that it was some sort of sequel to Sonic 06 that would specifically focus on Silver, which would make sense since Pete was the only known cast member. Why it was canceled, if this was real, I would guess since it was a sequel to Sonic 06. Treasure Tales was going to be a spin-off in the Sonic series focusing on Tails, and it would have been on the Sega Genesis. The game was said to have been an isometric platformer, think something similar to Super Mario RPG. The game wasn't believed to exist, as it wasn't known to have existed other than a proposal. The existence became known in August 2020 as a VHS resume from 1993 it was found, and it contained footage of what the game could have possibly looked like. Sonic X-treme, not to be confused with a different canceled game, which we will get to soon. It was a hoverboarding game with gameplay similar to the Tony Hawk series. It was going to be on the GameCube, Xbox, and the PS2. This game got actually pretty far into development, far more than most of the other games on this list, as a prototype was actually made using renderware and the developer's other games. A prototype was made, and it was sent to Sonic team head Yuji Naka, who seemed to have liked it and asked for a software design description to be submitted to Sega. Sega never responded after that, though, likely due to the development of Sonic Riders, which was a racing game with board elements. Sega likely thought these two games were too similar, and they chose to make Riders instead. The developer also shut down in 2006. However, the prototype itself has been made playable over the years. Sonic the Shadow World was going to be a PSP game developed by Climax, which were mainly known for making licensed games. There wasn't much known about this game, but the plot was said to be about Sonic getting trapped in the Shadow World, which is apparently where Shadow lives. It's unknown why this was canceled, but maybe it's because it completely messes up the backstory of Shadow. But honestly, that's probably giving Sega way too much credit. The third and final episode of Sonic the Hedgehog 4 was being worked on, but was eventually canceled. Unlike the first two episodes, which were developed by Dimps, this episode would have been developed by Sega Studios Australia. This episode would have also featured Knuckles, since there is an unused cutscene for episode 2, which has the Master Emerald and Knuckles. This episode was likely canceled due to Sega Studios Australia shutting down, as well as the disappointing sales of Sonic 4 Episode 2. A canceled Sonic movie, this one would have been released in the mid-90s. The plot would have been about a 12-year-old kid named Josh Pinsky who would use his dad's XR ride machine to bring Sonic to the real world. However, he would also bring Eggman to the real world as well. Sonic would have been a CGI character, similar to the current movies. However, since this movie would have been released in the mid-90s, it probably wouldn't have looked very good. Eggman creates a theme park where he turns kids into robots, and then Sonic fights Eggman in the video game. Funnily enough, this movie would have been a tie-in to the also canceled Sonic X-treme Sega Saturn game, which we will shortly get into. Sega signed a deal with MGM for the movie. They liked the treatment, but the people at Sega wanted Eggman to be replaced by an original villain, so that the movie would feel more original to existing fans. No one at MGM liked that idea. The script was shopped around and was pitched to the then brand new DreamWorks SKG. But since Sega wanted them to pay a large amount of money for the rights to the character, DreamWorks turned it down. The final nail in the coffin was when Sonic X-treme, the game that this movie was meant to tie into, got cancelled. SegaSonic Bros was an unreleased Sonic arcade game. It was a falling block puzzle game. The gameplay was similar to other puzzle games like Puyo Puyo and Tetris. The most notable thing about this game was that it featured a red Sonic recolor and a yellow Sonic recolor, which is interesting because they do look very similar to Tails and Knuckles. It's still unknown who these characters are, but considering the title of the game, I assume that these two characters are supposed to be Sonic's brothers. The game was cancelled due to poor performance in location tests in Japan. However, a working arcade board was discovered in 2016, and now it's completely playable. Sister Sonic was a cancelled RPG, and it would have been a spin-off about Sonic's sister. The game was actually going to be a reskin / port of a Japanese PC 8801 game called Pitfall Mail. But the characters were going to be replaced by Sonic characters, and the main character would have been replaced by Sonic's sister. It was reported in video game magazines that the game would have been showed off at the 1993 Toy Fair, but when that fair eventually came, Sister Sonic was nowhere to be found. Turns out that when the game's existence was confirmed, a lot of people were not happy and sent letters to Sega to not change it to fit into the Sonic franchise and just keep it in its original form. Eventually the game was delayed and then cancelled, and the original version was released in 1995 under the name Pitfall Mall Magical Fantasy Adventure for the Sega CD. Probably the most well-known cancelled Sonic game, and definitely the most crazy story, Sonic X-treme's development is pretty much like the definition of development hell. Originally a Sega Genesis game called Sonic Mars, which would have been set in the SatAM universe, and would have involved characters like Sally Acorn and the rest of the Freedom Fighters. It was then moved to the 32X, and then to Sega's new 3D console, the Sega Saturn. Now known as Sonic X-treme, the plot was now about Sonic battling Eggman to rescue a new character named Professor Gazebo, who was also the father of Sonic's new sidekick in the game, Tiara Bubowski. The bosses in this game would have included Fang the Sniper and Metal Sonic. The original concept for the game was to have two different types of gameplay, one for its main stages and another for the boss fights. Sega didn't like that they didn't have much progress on the main stages, but they loved the boss fights. The developers were forced to start the entire game from scratch. Then they found out that the engine was similar to another Saturn game that was being developed around the same time as this game, Nights into Dreams. They requested access, and at first, Sega was okay with this. But then Yuji Naka threatened to quit Nights into Dreams if they used the engine. Even though Sega was starting to advertise the upcoming Saturn game with toys and the aforementioned Wonders of the World movie, the development started getting so bad that some of the developers got ill. Eventually the game was cancelled, and a Saturn port of 3D Blast was released instead. And that is it. That last one got pretty crazy. Honestly, I feel like you could make an entire feature-length film about the development of Sonic X-treme. That's how crazy this whole story is. But anyway, so yeah, that was my list. I could make a part 2 because there are some more, canceled Sonic Media. But, yeah, so if you like this video, I would recommend you subscribe, like the video, and turn on notifications on. And goodbye.